Coming up, the New York Football Giants kick off 2024 at home and lay an absolute egg. 28-6 home loss to the Minnesota Vikings. We break down all of the different areas of concern, starting first and foremost with one Daniel Jones. We dive in coming up next. Yes, my friends, it's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your host. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Makowitz. We're healthy, wealthy, and wise, but the New York Football Giants are not. It's always tricky, Andy, to kick these shows off and still have the same energy and vibe that we want to have when we're doing the podcast versus the way that this team made us feel on Sunday. A lot of things to get to, obviously, but first and foremost, we're going to dive in on QB Daniel Jones.
Oh, I mean,
nice. That's always a good first word from Andrew Makowitz.
Listen, I was at FanFest with my son on Friday. The vibes were immaculate. Yeah, the vibes were immaculate. 50,000 fans were there. Everyone was excited about the promise of the season. I was in the parking lot at 9 a.m. tailgating with the family. And, you know, those tailgates always start out the same way. It's like you get there, you're like, this is going to be a tough matchup. Then you have a little bit of food. Maybe a couple of drinks are had. And then by noon, you're saying the Giants are going to win by 100 points, right?
That's right.
And that quickly went away. And it went away. And it went away very quickly watching Daniel Jones play quarterback. And there's no escaping it. We are obviously going to get into, Adam, all of the different things, especially around Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen and some of the decisions that were made. But this is all about Daniel Jones. There's no way around it. He was horrible. This, to me, was the worst game that I have witnessed Daniel Jones play in person. And that's saying a lot because I am a season ticket holder. I go to all the games. Adam, what else is there to say other than Daniel Jones looks scared? He couldn't process what was going on the field. He made boneheaded mistake after mistake. He threw another inexcusable pick six, just like he did in the Texans preseason game. And he couldn't push the ball downfield. I honestly don't know if there's any good that I can say about the quarterback performance for the Giants on Sunday.
No, it was a mess. And there's something even about that disastrous pick six that he threw that's also an indictment on the coaching staff as well, which is always a fun thing to throw in. But specifically when we talk about Daniel Jones, man, this is a game. Now listen, final stat line, right? 22 of 42, only 52.4 completion percentage. And that basically was a theme throughout. He was 8 of 16 at halftime of this game, 186 yards. But guess what? About 50 to 60 of those were empty calories in the fourth quarter of this game where it did not matter at all. You mentioned the pick six, obviously, that leads to an extra touchdown early for the Vikings. And then you put on top of it another interception, which came in the red zone inside the 10-yard line, looking for Darius Slayton in the end zone. When you watch back that play, it's just another at a high level because there's 1,000 plays we could talk about here, really. But at a high level, he throws that pass. It's a little bit behind Darius Slayton. He's going to have to reach back for it anyway, let alone that there's a cover man underneath. And then there's also a linebacker dropping back into coverage that would have absolutely massacred Slayton if he had gotten his hands on it. On top of which, just because this one really stood out to me, at a point in the game when it no longer mattered, they went for it on fourth down in the red zone. Wan'Dale Robinson trying to run a little slant route. And again, you'd sit here and say, does it really matter? He doesn't make the catch. No, it's not that he doesn't make the catch. It's that Daniel Jones, you go back and you watch that play, he snaps the ball, he takes his drops, he looks directly at him the entire time, never looks off of it at any point. And even though it's very good coverage on that play, the ball is again thrown at Wan'Dale Robinson's back hip as opposed to out in front of him to allow your receiver to make a play. And that's just indicative of what happened throughout this game for Daniel Jones. He short hopped a handful of players as well. There's a lot of those things that we talked about saying the beginning of last year, handful of games before the injury, bad offensive line play. Well, if only we could have seen the whole year, it would have been nice. I came into this saying restructured offensive line, you feel better about it. We'll talk about things at a high level here in a minute. But to have Daniel Jones come out, to your point, and just look like all of the worst traits that he at times has showcased over his career, all in one game and on the season opener, when you have all this time to prepare, and in the century season for the New York Football Giants. I can't imagine. I forgot that you were at the stadium, and just the deflating nature of you come out, you want it to be good. Nothing about the opening drive looks great, as they threw a pass for a -7 yards on the first series as well. It's just all of these things, man, really piled up. And it has to make it hard. I don't care if you're a diehard Giants fan, if you've been a Daniel Jones apologist, like we've made room for fans like that along the way. This performance made it borderline inexcusable to look at Daniel Jones and feel anything other than this is a disaster season waiting to happen.
It also brings into the question of like how many starts is Daniel Jones gonna get? Like if you are Joe Shane and Brian Dable, like we're gonna talk about how the decision making was
Sure.
puzzling at best between the two of them so far. But how long can you go with Daniel Jones looking the way that he did? Like for me, Adam, I think, and I don't, this isn't hyperbole, but like he has to figure it out against the Commanders,
Hmm.
or else have to seriously think about making a change because nothing was working. It's not just, oh, he had one bad throw here or there, or like, oh, he made a bad decision. The whole thing was terrible, right?
Yeah.
Like decision making was horrible. He was telegraphing all of his passes. He wasn't going through the progression that we wanted him to. The offense could not get anything going. And so for me, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm like, yeah, the Giants can't function as an offense with the quarterback play that we saw, and it's very hard. And I wanted to go into this conversation with you. I obviously slept on it and was very upset yesterday, and I wanted to be like, you know what? I'm not going to have the knee jerk reaction. I'm not going to go like full crazy. But there was not one redeeming thing that the Giants did on offense with Daniel Jones behind center. And so, honestly, do you feel like Daniel Jones has one more game to turn this around, or do you think his leash is longer? Because to me, I think it's the Commanders game or bust for him.
No, remember, Drew Lock came into this game abdomen, but was cleared and was on, ready to go today, yesterday, technically speaking. I don't know if he was fully physically ready to go or not. And my belief would be based on, I think, the way we all perceive Brian Dable's maybe sense or feeling of Daniel Jones as his quarterback, and maybe even all to Joe Shane. I think based on the first half of that game, you could have made a case that they may have said, we're going to bring in Drew Lock for the second half of this, because on a high level, it doesn't matter. Like we don't think that Daniel Jones is the future of the QB position, but it's your home opener. You're getting trounced. Your QB just looks frazzled and out of it. And you could talk about whatever you wanted to in the post game and say, we're going to bring him right back in and start him next week. But clearly he didn't have it. I think you and I talked about that this offseason. You have to have that willingness to say, hey, if it's not working, we're going to try something different. Because no matter how we thought the season could go and can still go, we didn't think this was a playoff football team in New York. So you need to be able to have that type of flexibility around the decision-making process. Now, that would have, I think, been, hey, wow, that's a really quick leash. You must have no belief in him. Okay, fine. So I think the health of Drew Lock may have impacted that decision, because the one thing you weren't going to do is pull Daniel Jones for Tommy DeVito in the first game of the season. I think that would have been on the table. So I agree with you. First half of the Washington Commanders game, if it comes out and looks strikingly similar to yesterday, Brian Dable is going to make the move to Drew Lock, and that's going to be the justification of to why you brought him in and why you paid him.
And even someone like me, who I think has given Daniel Jones the benefit of the doubt more than other
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
saying, listen, we need a number one wide receiver. Malik Neighbors is out there. He had that. We've said they need to improve this offensive line. By and large, I think the offensive line was improved from where it was last year. I'm not going to say that it was a world beating offensive line, but it gave
sure.
enough time for Daniel Jones to be able to operate, or any quarterback to operate. And the problem is, we've removed all the excuses. Daniel Jones is in the spotlight, and he just didn't deliver against what we expect to be just like a middle of the road defense. The Giants couldn't even get in the end zone once, Adam.
And listen, you heard the Vikings kind of talking a bit of smack leading up to this one, and it looks like it was very much justified. Coming up here in a second, it's not just Daniel Jones, though he's the poster child. There are other things coming out of this game that just make you really scratch your head from a coaching standpoint, and then also will lead into, I did not think we'd be doing this after the first game of the season. I like to just put the attention on the games and let's see how this team performs. But that's why we want to do it on Monday. One more conversation about what we alluded to in the offseason. 3 off seasons, 3 draft classes for Joe Shane. Where do we stand? And a lot of what you saw on Sunday starts to raise more questions than provide answers on where this franchise is headed. Good stuff for a Monday. Thanks for being in on the misery with us. We continue here in just one moment. All right, Andy. So we said Daniel Jones, absolute mess. One thing that I wanted to point to here, we'll get into more play calling stuff during the week, but on that play where he throws the pick six, there's a great clip. I think it's from Bobby Skinner, who puts up, he goes, hey, three wide receivers, bunch formation as Wan'Dale Robinson lines up behind him, like bubble screen anyone. And if you watch it, even though that ball gets intercepted, there's a linebacker that's coming right down. He's not going to be blocked. And Wan'Dale Robinson is going to put his life in peril if that pass gets completed. There were a number of times throughout this game when we had that conversation. I just wanted to put that in the mix because, hey, all these negative thoughts are rattling around our heads. From a team perspective and from a coaching perspective, there's something weird going on here in terms of who played in this game and who did not play in this game and who played where in this game. When you go and look at the snap counts that we had inside of this one, I mean, kind of your choice, Andy. Do we want to start in the secondary and where we saw Drew Phillips and Cordell Flott performing and what their snap counts were and where Adoree Jackson was? Because I know we had questions coming in at that position. You obviously brought a player in, and yet I think I had real concerns, or at least eyebrow raising, around Drew Phillips, who made some plays in this game when he had opportunities, but also wasn't on the field, even though they specifically targeted him to be the starting slot corner. And all of a sudden, the once outside corner in Cordell Flott now becomes an inside corner again.
This is confounding to me. I don't know a better word to describe it. Like, Adam, we can go a whole host of ways. I'm going to just list off in my mind what I was thinking while I was watching that. One, why is Darius Muasau starting at inside linebacker after Micah McFadden looks pretty good at the linebacker position? And people may say, well, Andy, clearly he's dealing with an injury. Okay, well, he wasn't on the injury report. They had him healthy. So, like, either they're playing coy and they're trying to be really cute with injury designations, or they're trying to throw everyone off the scent on a player who played pretty well for the Giants last year. So that was the first thing that was puzzling to me. The second, you draft Drew Phillips in the third round. He plays 7 defensive snaps. Why? You talk about Cordell Flott. What position is he playing all offseason? Oh, let's just have him start at a different position when week 1 starts. Then it's like Nick McLeod's outside. He gets hurt. Then all of a sudden Drew Phillips comes in. We start moving things around. What was the game plan? Like, what are we doing here, Adam? I don't understand. Isaiah Simmons, pay him guaranteed money to be a player. They talked about how his versatility at nickel corner was going to be an asset to this team. He doesn't even play one defensive snap. So you don't have any Micah McFadden. You don't have Isaiah Simmons. You just signed Adoree Jackson off the street. He plays 19 snaps. What was the plan? Do you have any idea what the plan was on defense yesterday?
No, and I mean, listen, the only thing that happened leading up to the game was Dane Belton having a back concern of some kind. So then you turn around and you see Tyler Nubin ends up playing a lot of reps, which was probably a little bit surprising early in this season. I'm putting that in because, hey, we're do both sides of the coin here. There were some things that happened. But that McFadden one to me, I want to give the grace of saying, well, the Giants just said everyone was healthy because, hey, we're going to go ahead and not allow the Vikings to know which way we're coming from. Now, again, we often say this about a team that is still having growing pains and needs to improve their roster. Nobody cares whether or not, and we like Micah McFadden, but the Vikings don't care if it's Micah McFadden or it's Muasau. Their game plan is going to be their game plan, right? Like, they're not going to all of a sudden make an adjustment based on the idea of who's playing alongside Bobby Okereke. They're worried about Bobby Okereke, about Kayvon Thibodeaux, about Brian Burns, about Dexter Lawrence. They're not worried about these secondary options. So if there was some level of like coy manipulation of the injury report and not wanting people to know what was going to come here, there's no point to do that. The Isaiah Simmons one is, and this kind of bleeds into a higher level conversation, obviously, at the GM position. But you mentioned the guaranteed money and then to not play a snap. Now, listen, we all saw in the preseason that he was going to have a really hard time covering receivers out of the slot because he's just not built that way. You can say that he has value on the back end of the defense at the safety position, but Dane Belton goes out and you don't utilize him there at all. You talk about the linebacker spot where Micah McFadden's not available, but you don't use him there at all. You go with your 7th round rookie draft pick. Now, it's like you can split it any which way you want. What is that player then doing on this roster at this point? And I think that was just the alarming part, to look across this game and say, what exactly was happening here? And by the way, you can flip it over to the offensive side where we're not terribly surprised by the fact that Jalen Hyatt did not get a lot of reps in this game. But he did not get a lot of reps in this game. So where are the weapons? And then incidentally, you and I, hey, a little bit of egg on our face here. Who had the most reps at the tight end position? It was Theo Johnson, the rookie 4th rounder. Dane Belton only saw 16 reps in this game. Now, it's like, does game script matter in this, and down and distance and being behind and needing to? Maybe. But again, the Giants are not built in a way that you should ever be totally reshaping the identity of your roster on game day, in game, based on being down 2 scores or whatever it may be. The Dane Belton piece, I know I'm kind of bouncing around a few of these different names. That one was alarming to me. So where is the player value for Daniel Bellinger? I apologize. Where is the value on him right now? He's playing minimal reps. You're giving him to the rookie. They're both 4th round draft picks, both draft picks of this regime. And then you have traditional blocking tight ends. So you kept him, which we thought made sense. But now if he's not playing, maybe it didn't make sense that you kept him this offseason instead of going in a different direction. All over the place there. But the reps coming out of this game raise so many questions. And I do direct this at Brian Dable and also at Shane Bowen in terms of what do we have and how are we best utilizing the talent on this roster?
On the defensive side of the ball, it also makes me think about our big offseason acquisition in Brian Burns. He was not a difference maker on the field, and the Giants desperately need him to be that type of player, or else none of this works. We talk about winning one-on-one matchups. If you talk about the pass rushing situation, Kayvon Thibodeau had 1 QB hit, no other stat.
Yeah.
Brian Burns, 4 tackles, no QB hits, no sacks, no hurries, no pass deflections, nothing.
Yeah.
Azeez Ojulari, only other edge rusher that got snaps and playing time, 1 tackle. So you're talking about the entire edge group had 1 pass deflection, no or had 1 QB hit, no sacks, no hurries, nothing. Like Adam, nothing was good. Like we can talk about Daniel Jones and how the offense wasn't functional, but the defense was not good. They let Sam Darnold complete passes all over the field. He started 12 for 12. They made Sam Darnold look like a very competent NFL quarterback. And that is not, obviously, the offense didn't help the defense out, and the defense was on the field quite a bit, but they didn't stop him at all. It felt like the Vikings were doing whatever they wanted on offense, and the Giants had no answers for them at all.
No, it was, you mentioned the Sam Darnold piece of it. So let's do this here before we end up turning over to close out the high level conversation about the GM. When you go and you look at this game, I mean, listen, we came into it, and I'm going to say that Andy mentioned, I'm not concerned about Sam Darnold. And I'm not doing that to throw Andy under the bus. By the way, all of our picks were horrendous going into this weekend. It was an absolute mess. But it's one of those things where, to your point, you turn around 19 of 24, 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 79 QBR, 113 rating. Everything was on time and on schedule for him. And coming into this game, we said, well, take away things over the top. Obviously, the script, the pick 6 and getting them a lead, it changes it. But there was no necessity for the Minnesota Vikings to have to place urgency on Sam Darnold. He rolled out of the pocket beautifully and hit a couple of throws near the sidelines on the run. Like, you know what I mean? Everything was clean and easy and fluid. And to your point, one of the things I think we're going to start to talk about now, because you mentioned this in an interesting way in the offseason when the Giants made the trade for Brian Burns. And you said, hey, this is a great player to have. We both agreed. Okay, big contract. But you noted in the long run, is Kayvon Thibodeau definitely going to be a guy that gets a massive contract with this team? There'll be a lot of money to occupy in those 2 positions. And there's still a few years off 5th-year option. But the problem might be here that these are 2 edge rushers that are not big. They are undersized speed guys primarily. If they don't get there with their quickness and get around the edge on what is a strong tandem at the tackle position for the Vikings, but that's going to come up more often than not over the course of their schedule. If they can't get home on those, you leave Dexter Lawrence by himself to try to work through double teams in the middle, and you're going to create problems potentially. Now, that's not something I'm going to go macro with. I think that, hey, we'll talk about that as the season unfolds. It's just one game. And throughout this week, we'll talk about those reps more in depth. But I think it just fell into this bag of, oh, not only was Daniel Jones a disaster, not only were the snap counts all over the place for players, we couldn't quite get our head around it. Also, some of our most important players weren't at least going out there and giving you some one-on-one wins where you'd come out of this game saying, hey, okay, it wasn't perfect, but it mostly was, I don't know what's happening here. And that's why coming up here in 1 second, Andy will give his follow-up to that and also turn our attention to what we said was at least a big year. Didn't say for better or worse, for good or bad, a big year for the Joe Schoen regime, 3 off seasons, 3 draft classes. Do we have a problem on our hands? Let's go ahead and close out with that coming up here in just one moment. All right. Obviously, the New York Football Giants, they lose this game at home, 28-6. We'll get into more of, again, another season opener and another game in recent history for the Giants where they can't put any points on the board at any point in the game. I mean, you know, the only team that looked worse was the Carolina Panthers. And maybe we'll talk about that this week too, with some of our picks and things that we had going on coming into this weekend. But when you back this thing out now at a high level, and we talk about the reps here for a lot of the guys, the offensive line, we'll get into how they looked on an individual level, how they performed. We'll get into the running game. But Joe Shane coming into this year, we said these off seasons, these draft classes, these guys need to hit. And obviously now Micah McFadden, maybe it is just injury, or does he now fall into that category, right? Where do you stand as this first game? Because a hot take I'll say that I was going to come in with is Daniel Jones looked a mess. But I think this game is more about Joe Shane than it is about any one individual performance, because collectively, it just doesn't seem like a well-constructed team to be balanced week over week, understanding the QB play is imperative and your QB is not good, but we also know the QB is here because of you.
Uh, I thought the same thing, Adam. Sitting in the stands, watching what I saw happen, the quarterback looked lost. The game plan seemed a mess. The
Yeah.
defense couldn't stop the run. Aaron Jones averaged 6.7 yards per carry.
A couple of those big break-off runs and key moments.
He did whatever he wanted to, and then Sam Darnold complimented, as you mentioned, play action, rolling out, was completing passes on target, on time to people. There wasn't a single redeeming part of that. Everyone's like, oh, Jamie Gillen was punting and the special teams, Gano made 2 field goals. One of those punts should have been blocked for sure. Like the early punt, the guy like almost jumped past the kick. That would have been the icing on, the cherry on top, basically. But Adam, I was thinking the same thing. I'm walking out of the stadium early in the fourth quarter with absolute zero confidence that the Giants have a chance to come back in the game, by the way.
Oh, well, yeah,
And
stop it.
I'm thinking, right? Like I'm heading to my car. I'm not even listening for what's happening inside the stadium because I already know what the fate is of the New York Giants.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, where are we as an organization? We got rid of Dave Gettleman because of his poor decision-making, signing guys like Jonathan Stewart, handing out contracts to Kenny Golladay, drafting Saquon Barkley so early, with one of the top 5 picks in the draft, drafting Daniel Jones. And, we felt the breath of fresh air with Joe Shane coming to the helm. And we're like, wow, he's a really nice guy. He's super smart. He's personable. Like, we like him and we like his style. But the problem is the results don't match any of that yet. And I think we've been giving Joe Shane a pass, being like, well, he inherited this mess. Look at all the terrible draft picks that he had from Dave Gettleman. It's like, well, Andrew Thomas was a Dave Gettleman draft pick, right? Like Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah.
Like all these players that are contributing for the Giants are actually the previous regime. And when you start peeling back the onion of the Evan Neals of the world and other draft picks that have just been complete whiffs for Joe Shane, you have to turn around and say, the quarterback is a problem, but you also were the one that gave the contract to that quarterback. You tied yourself to this quarterback, and it doesn't feel like the decisions that Joe Shane has made are proving to be successful yet. And you have to turn around and say, if this continues for the rest of the season, it lies squarely at the feet of Joe Shane and also Brian Daboll, because they were the toast of the town in year 1. And guess what? Now here we sit. Nothing is better. That season might have actually hurt the Giants' rebuild, because now we're kind of sitting in no man's land with a quarterback making $40 million that we're talking about benching in week 2. We're talking about a defense that couldn't stop the run or the pass. We're talking about an offense that did not score a touchdown in the opening weekend again at home. And I'm sitting here saying, what is the direction of the organization? What is the North Star? Like, where are we heading that you can see progress, Adam? That's what I'm thinking in my mind, because there's only a handful of guys that I could see on this roster that we absolutely need moving forward.
Dude, it's a great way to frame it, man. I've got a dog in the background that's disgusted with the performance as well from the New York Football Giants. And again, like I say, I want to remind everybody, we are going to turn the page on this game and on this week. And we are going to try to reset ourselves and talk about areas that anybody individually looks successful, or what would be the easy ways if you take Daniel Jones out and you put Drew Lock in, that things would look different, right? Competent QB play. But you're right. You go through that list of players and the guys that are now pieces of this. And even this offseason, we talk about, did we like the John Runyon Jr. signing? Yes, we did. Did we like Illuminor? Yes, we did. Did we not like the fact that you had to pivot to Van Roten and then rotate Illuminor out to right tackle because Evan Neal was going to be a miss? No, we did not. Did we like the fact that you maybe got beat to the punch in the draft and didn't address the second corner position and then sat all off season selling us that Cordell Flott was going to be the starting outside corner? Then he even gets injured and you still sit there and wait until you ultimately bring back a player that you didn't want to bring back because you didn't keep him after last season. Like, there's so many of those things at a high level. I know you mentioned Joe Shane, like nice guy, good personality. I just think that, man, and I said this, and I've got friends that have the receipts on it. You go back at the last 2 times that the Giants hired GMs, every time that I've said I would like if they went with this GM and this head coach, they've never gone that way, and it continues to seemingly not be working out. Ryan Poles and D'Amico Ryan, that was my ticket when the Giants were going to market for a GM and a new head coach. Like, it just seems like right now, and we thought it was better because they went outside of the organization this time around. But the Giants do seem like a franchise just stuck in perpetual ambiguity about what they want. And that includes even some decisions like this offseason where internally it felt like there was this push and pull about Saquon Barkley and what should we be doing and what is the identity going to be. I thought it was weird to have someone else question Joe Shane about what will our identity be if we don't re-sign Saquon Barkley. Well, guess what? What will our identity be if we don't re-sign Saquon Barkley? All of a sudden, it just opens up all of these potential wounds for this season.
At the end of the day, I have one pointed question for you. Is this just 1 week, week 1, a mess? The Giants can turn it around. Do you believe that we should look at this game and throw it out and that the Giants still have an opportunity to be a good football team this year?
When Brian Daboll says that they were prepared to play, that everyone was ready to go, that is the reason that I don't think you can have a lot of optimism. Because I'd rather
if that's what being prepared looks like, Adam, we are in a world of hurt. You nailed it. Like, and you heard Kevin O'Connell in his post-game speech for the Minnesota Vikings. He was like, we were the more prepared team, and that's why we won the game. We played every snap. We executed better than they did everywhere. He was 100% right. Kevin O'Connell outcoached Brian Daboll, and you and I thought it was kind of like a heavyweight bout of like who's going to look better. Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell looked far better than Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones. They honestly have one more week to turn this around, or I think even the most optimistic fans will look and say, this season's in the tank. How quickly can we start looking towards next season? And it's really sad to say that after 1 week. But Adam, division game against the Commanders, they have 1 week to figure this thing out.
Oh, of course, man. And like you say, you don't want to have to frame it that way, but that's how bad this game was, that you feel like you might be able to frame the entire season based on what happens in the first quarter and a half of next week's game against the Washington Commanders, a team that lost, but oh, by the way, has a rookie QB that looks pretty good. Looks like he's going to be a player. So we'll find out soon enough. Again, as a reminder, all week long, we're going to go in. We'll do snap counts in full during this week. We're going to go into the offensive line. How did this new line look? We're going to go inside some key plays within the running game. We're going to talk about how, yes, Tyrone Tracy Jr. well outsnapped Eric Gray in this one. Was that because of game script? We'll look into that as well. We'll talk about the wide receiver room, performers, and then defensively, where are the answers going to come as you reset yourself looking ahead to the Commanders matchup? So there's plenty to look at here, but we had to do it. Everybody needed it. Everyone needs the morning after where that game looked as bad as it did, and the hearts of the collective fan base is basically not fully pull out of your chest, but like the cavity's open. The thing is exposed, and you're wondering if they can get it back in time. Get us over on YouTube. Get us on the podcast feed. Go check out our sponsors as well. We'll be back tomorrow, back 5 days a week, breaking it down up until the point that they officially dig the grave and throw the collective Giants fan base into it. Until next time, though. Until the best times, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.